Welcome back to This Is How We Create. My name is Martine Severin, your host. Today we have cookbook author and just overall woman who is extraordinary on the show, Nicole A. Taylor. Nicole is the author of Watermelon and Redbirds, the first cookbook dedicated to Juneteenth, and the visionary behind the Up South movement that bridges Southern roots with cosmopolitan creativity. I'm hoping that this conversation is going to be about food and about the courage to reclaim narratives that others have tried to define for you. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Martine, thank you for having me.
This episode is brought to you by iCode. Every child starts as a creator. They imagine stories, build worlds, and ask big questions. But as they grow up, creativity can take a backseat to routine and screens. That's where iCode comes in. Through after-school STEM activities, iCode's programs give kids a space to create again. Visit icodeschool.com to book a free trial. All right, so Nicole, you started cooking at 9 years old in Athens, Georgia, out of pure curiosity. Can you tell me a little bit about what was it about the kitchen that drew you in?
The kitchen has always been the place of freedom for me. I mean, when I think about it now, I'm like, I was in grade school, in the kitchen by myself, not asking permission at first to cook. And then it became my thing. My aunts, I grew up in the house with my two aunts, my uncle and my mom. And they would come home from work sometimes, and I would have like pulled out a box of a cake mix and made a cake or made hamburger helper or whatever I saw in the fridge or on the counter. And at first they would like chastise me or punish me. And then finally they were like, wait, I think this girl kind of knows her way around the kitchen. Go ahead, you can cook. And those words, go ahead and cook, and even cook for us, I gained a bit of freedom and curiosity. And that was the moment where I knew that my family, that my immediate family, was okay with me being me.
Oh, that's really interesting. So then what was it about it that allowed you to be yourself? Was it the fact that you were given leave, I should say, you were giving leave to go into the kitchen and to do what you wanted?
I think it was what that moment or those moments really said to me is that you don't have to be the kid that has to follow all the rules, right? You're not the kid that must eat the TV dinner, or you have to ask for permission to go inside of the refrigerator. I think those moments really clued me in on believing that I had the power to make my own decisions when adult had full confidence in me, or anybody had full confidence in me.
Wow. Oh gosh. It's such a thing to have a thing, right? Where people have confidence in you and you know that you are able to be creative.
Yeah, it is a thing. I mean, honestly, it took the passing of my aunt who recently passed away just in the last month for me to even realize the gift that my immediate family, my two aunts, my uncle and my mom, what they've given me, and more particularly my aunt, that's really like never really chastising the choices I made, particularly around cooking or going in the grocery store and begging for the cinnamon roll, the twisty cinnamon roll thing. And I would beg for that and bringing it home and putting my own spin on the icing, or constantly asking if I can make a batch of cookies. I didn't realize until she passed away how much freedom and how much space that she gave me to really just be myself and to explore other things, you know? She is a woman who grew up in 1950s segregated South, and I am a person who left small town South and never returned until like the pandemic. But I always knew in the back of my mind that they were okay with that. There was always this this sentence behind me, this voice behind me saying, you'll be okay. You are okay because you have special wings, you have a special gift. So I've just come into that knowing fully the power of adults and people who you love giving you confidence, and that it can be given to you in so many ways that aren't just telling you or saying, I believe in you, I'm confident in you, I'm proud. It could be allowing you to be in the kitchen and being creative.
You're very lucky. You're very lucky to have had that experience. How and then I'm thinking too, in a time in the 1950s where women's roles and the jobs that they could have were so confined to that time, that you having the ability and the courage as well as the freedom to explore in the kitchen was in some ways kind of must have been kind of revolutionary because you were able to do all of these things and have that freedom where potentially that wasn't available to your aunts and to the other women of that time as well.
Yeah, it wasn't even just the kitchen per se. I mean, I did so many amazing things as a young person and young adult. I was in the band. I've always been an avid reader. I was in the choir. I left Athens and went off to college in Atlanta and explored a career working in the nonprofit sector. I mean, countless things. I had so many jobs. I was a gift wrapper. I worked at a jewelry store. I worked at fast food spots. I never was the girl that was boxed into just doing one thing. I worked in retail. I had this love affair with luxury and fashion, but all of those things, all those bits and pieces of who I am and the very things that I've done in my adult life, I think that those seeds were planted with women who understood the power of letting people be, or if I could say it in a more detailed way, understood the power of letting a person experience things they haven't experienced. And so I was given that gift to do that freely. And it is something that I'm now looking at as probably the biggest gift that I've ever received.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about watermelon and redbirds, mainly because I'm so fascinated by that cookbook and by the fact that you dedicated it's all about Juneteenth. And for me, I literally did not know about Juneteenth until I was a grown woman, right? So I think probably up until I was in my 30s and I grew up here in the US. So when did you first have the idea for that book?
It's so funny. I think, like me, Black Americans or Black people around the diaspora, Juneteenth is something maybe you heard the word or you never heard the word, but it is a holiday that so many people are discovering or discovered later in life. It wasn't a holiday that they grew up with. For me, I did grow up with very similar freedom celebrations that mirror Juneteenth, the family reunion, the annual fish fry, the church homecoming, where people were dressed to the nines, where there was music, where there was very similar food that you would find in a Juneteenth celebration in the state of Texas. So I knew the cadence of Juneteenth, but my first Juneteenth celebration was actually in Brooklyn, New York, in a park in Fort Greene, which is a neighborhood in Brooklyn. And it was at that moment when I saw a young boy. His eyes were really big with a big smile on his face, riding around the park in a pony. Um, I locked eyes with him, and there was a joy, there was a pureness in his face. And it was at that moment that I said, you know what? I want to make Juneteenth a part of my life. I want to share the joy and the jubilation of the Juneteenth celebration, the day that enslaved Africans in the state of Texas found out they were free. I want to make that a celebration for my community. So it started off as me just celebrating Juneteenth every year in so many different ways. Of course, I've been writing about food culture and Black food ways, and even had a podcast about New York food culture, Black food ways, Southern food ways. And over time, Juneteenth became this annual conversation that I had, annual event. And my editor and other food writers kind of knew me as the person that was talking about Juneteenth. I definitely wasn't the first person to write about it. But in contemporary times, I wrote a big article for the New York Times about Juneteenth and the origins of Juneteenth foods. And that kind of solidified my voice as being an expert or a leading champion of Juneteenth cuisine. And at that point, Juneteenth was still a small little holiday that wasn't on a lot of people's radar. But as you know, during the pandemic, Juneteenth, the holiday, became a rallying cry for celebration, for rest, for freedom, for Black joy. And that is when the book, I birthed the idea. I think the idea was already in me, but that's when a major publisher said this should be a thing. So that is how Watermelon and Redbirds, the first cookbook dedicated to the Juneteenth holiday, came to be. And it's one story. Like there should be like 50 million gazillion books about Juneteenth. It's just my story of Black celebrations and my very unique lens of how I've celebrated Juneteenth and how I've centered the very Texas holiday for, more than a decade.
Well, Nicole, I want to talk to you a little bit about a quote that I heard that came from you, and perhaps it's not. Perhaps I'll be misquoting you, but I've heard you said that you have to know who you are and what you won't do. And you say that knowing who you are and what you won't do is really an essential part for navigating your industry. So you mentioned staying true to your vernacular, your way of talking, your perspectives. So for some of the creatives who might be getting the pressure to change their voice or let's say code switch, what advice would you have for them to hold the line?
I think I'm really tapped into who I am and I create my best work when I am fully standing in who I am and I'm fully committed to always having my personal code of ethics in the back of my head, in the front of my head, in front of me, in my phone. And there are certain things that I won't bend on. One of the simple things that I always say, and I know it can be crazy to certain people, like, this industry, food writers, food culture, people, is very small. I mean, and when you get in New York, like everyone knows everyone. It's a very small and very privileged circle. But one thing that I've always vowed that I will never publicly or privately drag another Black person to white counterparts. That's something that I won't do. It's been a journey to be able to write a one cookbook, but to get to the point where you are writing 4 cookbooks and that you have bylines in a major publication, I know it's not easy. So one of the things that I always say is I'm not publicly dragging my Black colleagues in public. If I have a problem with them, either I don't say anything at all or I'll tell them privately. So that's like one of my things the non-negotiables. And another thing is that's super important to me is that I always wasn't comfortable with. I would be very nervous about my voice, my actual physical voice. Like I would be concerned about, am I using the right words? Is it the King English? Are people going to judge me because I have a certain Southern accent? And then I had to let that go because I realized that my intelligence is not wrapped up into splitting my verbs or if I'm putting an R on something, if I am using African American vernacular English. It is my superpower. I realize it's my superpower when I bring in Southern sayings and Southern colloquialism because it is an art that is dying. There are so many people who have roots in the American South, who are from the American South, and they don't sound like they are from the American South. There are very many people who are my age who are born and raised in small town Georgia that are frankly proud of it. But that was not always my story. So I have my non-negotiable is to show up 100% as myself and to speak how I would speak mostly around my friends, my family, and my son in whatever space that I'm in.
Did it take you a while to get there?
Oh yeah, it definitely took me a while. I mean, even now, in certain spaces, I'm like, "Ah, did I say that right?" I have friends and colleagues, people who like to correct people. I think that is, it's interesting when people correct folks when they're speaking, and I would be annoyed by that, but I'm no longer annoyed by that because I always. I mean, I went to college. I went to graduated from a historically Black college, Clark Atlanta University, where I met all types of Black people, rich, poor, from California, New York, the Caribbean. There was when they say we are not a monolith, I learned that at a historically Black college. But I wasn't always confident when I walked in a room about where I came from, about my Southern accent. And it took me basically being in rooms with, a bunch of different people who didn't look like me to realize, like, wait, it's just as much as about art. You read 2 and 3 books a month, you travel. So what's the difference here? There is no difference. So, it took life experiences for me to understand that it is okay to be yourself at all times. You don't have to code switch.
Ooh, you're the second person who's told me that today. Or who said that, but I feel like you're talking to me. Oh gosh. Okay, so you've learned so much about yourself over the years. You've learned that writing a cookbook, I'm sure, is an undertaking and it takes years. How about how long does it take you from the idea to the cookbook being in the hands of say me?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's so funny because some of my closest friends don't get it. They're like, "Oh, so is your cookbook coming out next year?" I'm like, "I wish." It is a process that I think it's probably one of the most unique processes in publishing. The book that I'm working on now is called the Maroon House Cookbook. The first book that I published that will be 10 years old this October, the Up South Cookbook. It was both of them are vastly different. I would say with the Up South Cookbook, I was so excited. There was this fearlessness about me. There wasn't like this business acumen, bubbling up around me. It was all about me being true to myself, being pure and telling stories. I really didn't know a lot about recipe testing and development. I just wanted to like write a cookbook. And I was privileged to do that with Countryman Press, which is a division of Norton, W. Norton. I think we sold that book. I had a literary agent for several years, but I could never get my proposal together because I didn't know what to do. And frankly, I think I was scared. So I finally got a proposal together and we sold the book. I remember like 15 publishers saying, nope, nope, nope. And I got a tiny advance and shot that book. And the book came out probably the next year. So that was 10 years ago. With the now fourth cookbook that I'm working on, I came up with that idea right after I finished the Juneteenth cookbook. So that was in pandemic times, 2020, 2021. We're now in 2025. And I was like, wait, I have moved temporarily to my hometown, Athens, renovated a house, thought I was going to be here for 6 months. It's been 2 years. And I've had so many special moments with my family, with friends, with new friends because of the pandemic. The way I've cooked, the way I've organized myself, I think this could be a cookbook. So I was like, this could be a cookbook about the modern Black family and how the modern Black family entertains, what their home looks like, what the food looks like. And I just started taking notes. I just started, snapping photos of everything I was eating, ideas of what I tell my friends when they ask me about, dishware that I have and where I got it from. And I worked on a proposal for about a year. And then I was with my agent, my longtime agent, and we couldn't get it sold. And I switched agents. And he was like, rework your proposal. And then we took it out to publishers. And then we finally, Abrams, my editor at Abrams, she got it. So it's a 5-year process, and I haven't turned my manuscript in yet. We're 5 years into the ideation part. And what comes next is photo shoot, editing, copy edits. I mean, I'm like a whole another year plus before the book comes out. So there you go. So cookbooks aren't easy, and I will say that, I have my publisher, my agent have been gracious that I've been given more time, but the industry typically, when you get a book deal and they are into it, they want to get it out as soon as possible. But yeah, from ideation until where we are right now. I'm like 5 years in the game. And, some people, they have to retweak their idea or they move away from their idea and they come up with another idea. But I will say that I still have feelings where my stomach flutters to know that I'm creating something that is that will live on, something that is a cultural artifact, that can be a cultural artifact. I'm not just doing some recipes that are from my TikTok page. I have an opportunity to tell a story about Black culture, about family, about togetherness that can inspire people. So that gets me excited and that keeps me going.
So I know that cookbooks aren't easy and that the process isn't easy, but how have you become easier with yourself and kinder with yourself throughout the last few years of writing cookbooks?
That is a great question. It's hard. It is very hard because, being a creative is one thing, right? Being a creative is all about, in my opinion, building a creative practice, right? And it requires discipline. That means over time, and because I have a kid now, I'm up early. I'm up at 6:30. I will tell you that I do my best work between 6:30 and 9 o'clock. If I start writing immediately, that's when I know I'm going to have a great day. If I'm working on my book then, if I'm chipping on my book every single day, I feel good. I sometimes, because my brain, when you're writing a cookbook and when you are a entrepreneur like myself, everything I do is based on what I produce. I'm always thinking like a businesswoman. I'm always thinking about 2 months from now, 3 months from now. I'm thinking about what I have to do between now and the end of the year and what checks are coming. It's very hard to sometimes be like, you know what? I need to take 2 weeks off and just relax. My aunt passed away. I mean, I was there when she took her last breath. And unfortunately, I had to take meetings. I had to take meetings for a whole month. I've come back to New York. I've tried to take it easy. I've gone to yoga. I meditate every day. I listen to Alice Coltrane every single morning. I've done that for the last 7 years. So I still do that every day. I burn incense every single day to start my morning. I have coffee every morning, a lot of rituals, but it still is not easy sometimes to incorporate things that actually, if I want to say it, help me be more creative.
Wow. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciated talking with you. This has been quite an interesting conversation for me because I think I'm walking out with so many insights and a lot to think about. Thank you for coming on and for being so generous with your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi there. If you're loving the show, would you mind taking a quick second to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite go-to podcast app? While you're at it, subscribe to our Substack newsletter, Creative Matters. You can find the link to subscribe in the show notes. All right, that's all that I have for you today. Bye.